Greetings, everyone. Welcome, dear Sister Oya.
We are all welcome, dear Tülin. Good evening.
This evening we will talk about time. And right now, you and I are at different time zones. There is a 2 hours difference between us. An apt synchronicity for this evening's topic.
I love when we notice such synchronicities. Moreover, there is a calendrical addition to this synchronicity as well. Today is March 21st, spring equinox, when both hemispheres of our planet get an equal amount of sunlight, then day and night are equal. So, let's appreciate the coming of spring, the beginning of rejuvenation of nature.
Last week, we had discussed how our body and mental states are closely intertwined with world time. For example, right now I am in Holland, so there is a 2-hour time difference between Turkey and my location, because my current location is more to the west local time, reads 2 hours earlier than local time of Oya. Yet my body is still attuned to Turkey time and tells me now, Tülin, it is already 11 p.m., you need to get ready for sleep. But I tell to myself says, no, it is too early for that. There is a tug of time within me now. And when the daylight saving time changes, this 2-hour difference will become 1 hour or 3 hours. As you see, all of us are at different time zones, in different locations that are relative to each other all over the world, and we are trying to reach each other by sharing this duration or part of time together this evening. And relativity of world time continues, as other dear friends will watch the recording of this video later in time, maybe years later. This evening we will read about the periodical, the cyclical phases of the world time that follow each other. For example, spring equinox is the awakening of spring after the deep slumber of winter. Independent from human-made measurements of time, there is also the fundamental time of this world, as our planet goes around itself, and day follows night, as our planet completes an orbit around sun, seasons follow each other. Each of these phases influence our body, our bodily systems, our moods, our way of living as much as we are in sync with the rhythms of these cycles and phases. More we are in sync with a given cycle or phase, less we experience adverse effects of the conditions and situations that cycle or phase bring out. Still, the adaptation ability of the mankind is so great that if needed, we can quickly adapt to unexpected conditions at a given cycle or phase as well.
Although, our body has its own clock and more in sync and in harmony with its familiar environment's time, when we quickly travel to a different time zone with a different season, we can still reprogram our body by giving signals and suggestions to ourselves about the new conditions. Yes, if the distance we travel is too large, then the time difference increases and the adaptation period lasts longer, which is called as jet lag. As our dear friends see, things depend on how we can mentally transform things. We are within a system that depends on how we code things through our perception processes to harmonize these with our own body and its environment. And of course, all those comings and goings within time perception of our world affect us. It is impossible for us to be indifferent to go back and forth in world time, or go back and forth in past and future. Yet, this is how we experience the past and the future in this chronological and psychological manner. All of these are exercises for us to get out of our physical and mental comfort zones, and to learn flexing our boundaries more and more.
Let's use the well-known example. Here time continues in a linear plane, and your location is marked at the 8:30 p.m., and somewhere here. And I am, let's say here in the linear plane, 2 hours earlier than your local time. When we curve this linear plane, which is space, 8:30 p.m. and 6:30 p.m., meet at the same point in the space-time curvature. Well, our dear friends may think this evening's discussion is like a geometry lecture, but in order to give us some intuitions about different comprehensions of the superficial time and the spherical time and the original time, the divine order and the universe contain some figures. These will help us in visualizing and imagining that fourth dimension named as time. Yes, let's start reading. As to the reason for the barrenness of world time, We have said that time is related to comprehension. The more the scope of comprehensions expands, the more comprehensive the time system they are subject to becomes. However, the expansion in the scope of comprehension means they're gaining more values, an increase in their values. Since the comprehension of the human realm is almost within the same cadres of values, the time it is subject to is a simple system. The simplicity of this system is because of the imperative that it has to have a focus, a definite beginning, and states of past, present, and future. This situation is the imperative of the simplicity of the world matter and of the comprehension which is subject to it. There is a limit in the comprehension of world time. In world time there is the imperative that certain points should follow each other at certain intervals as cycles. Likewise, every reality has a beginning point and an ending point. However, high comprehension of time displays great differences on this regard. And these differences are certainly the consequence and necessity of the richness and encompassment of the comprehension values belonging to this time, relative to the values of the simple time. This comprehension possesses such subtle matter combinations that vibrations emanating from these attain a time measurement, qualified with a great speed and scope, which is incomparable with simpler comprehension. According to this comprehension, the states of past, present, and future in the flow of time do not have to follow each other in one direction, unlike simple comprehension. In higher comprehension, all of these states of past, present, and future connect into a single occurrence as a total. However, this single occurrence displays forms with infinite aspects. That is, within that single occurrence, which means a moment, infinite concepts of time are gathered, orientated to every direction.
Again, we read a very comprehensive passage. And before we delve into this vast topic, let's remind each other that, just as we discussed last week, each of us has our own time comprehension, and this is defined as the superficial time, as past, present, and future, and even these three different perceptions of time vary with each person. For example, let me ask you, dear friends, where are the past and the future for you? Can you point to it? As we reply, we may discover that some of us define it as going from left to right, and some of define it as going from right to left, and for some, it goes from front to back. These are examples of how different each of us comprehend the world time, because each of us can only define it within the scope of our own level of comprehension. In short, each of us has a model for time. And the divine order and the universe describe this limitedness and relativeness or subjectivity of the superficial time as barren. In what sense? It is barren, compared to higher levels, because the world we live in has a limited capacity of perception, a specific manner of perceiving, hence, our brain and body has a certain limit for perceiving, understanding and comprehending. All these limits are due to the certain laws governing the universe and the world, and consequently, we humans are subject to these laws that rendering the manner of perception in this world barren, compared to higher levels. And the divine order and the universe explains this limitedness of the physical body and also explains us that how much wider our capacity of perception and comprehension is at higher levels of our existence, so we can push the boundaries of our perception by intuitions, by the power of imagination. As we read on the following passages, you will feel that the descriptions and explanations about time will push those boundaries of our perception, and as we make more efforts on that direction, we may move beyond that barrenness the book mentions. And we read here that the more the scope of comprehensions expands, the more comprehensive the time system they are subject to becomes. However, the expansion in the scope of comprehension means they're gaining more values, an increase in their values. We can easily understand what it is meant by gaining more values if we think about our earlier ways of perceiving time in our childhood or young age, and about our current ways of perceiving time in our older age. Because, during those years, our comprehension gained more values. We don't see the world as we did in our childhood, so, widening our comprehension means having a much more complex time comprehension. Within certain limits, we experience the fringes of those boundaries of our world time, which is simple. And those experiences and the related knowledge we read in the divine order and the universe allow us to reach mentally and intuitively beyond those limits. Yes, within this physical body, as our being's vehicle in the hydrogen cosmos, we humans continue to exist at the superficial time comprehension with beginnings and endings. However, at the higher levels, we read in this passage that there is no past, present, and future. Soon we will read more about this and try to do our best for understanding those explanations. Yes, we will need to push the limits of our worldly comprehension, and together, we can do this in a better way.
We had read and discussed that the world time progresses as periods or cycles that are following each other, and the book describes this as an imperative. And we all know that things progress and get developed within some processes. We can quicken our steps within a process, but we cannot jump from the beginning to the ending of any process. In short, things progress step by step. As explained in this passage, speed and scope increase by comprehension. And we know that in this world, we can only be semi-comprehending at best, but mostly in automatic states. Our way of perceiving time changes in accordance to the level of our comprehension. Your words reminded me our dear NLP teacher Tamer Davuç's way of making us aware of our perception of time. He would ask, for example, "Where do you feel the next day?" Some of us place next day in front of their body, a meter ahead. Some of us place next day on the right side, 1 meter ahead. Or he would ask, "Where do you feel the past?" Some of us felt it at the nape of their neck, some of us felt it at the back of their body, with 1 meter to 1 kilometer distance. And Mr. Davuçu had shared an interesting and telling observation. For the people of the West, past and future is felt as a line extending from left to right, and because of this, they can make long-term plans for future by taking the past into consideration. However, for the people of the East, especially we Turks, future is a line going ahead, and the past is left at the back. And because of this, remembering the past and the lessons we are expected to learn from the past events are affected by this. We cannot remember the lessons of the past events. Therefore, most of the time, we can only save the day by our hastily made plans. Also, people who are more focused on the past continue to live mostly in the past. Their perception is all about the past events. He did this, she said this, I did this, I didn't do this, etc., etc. Victim mentality is another expression of this focus on the past events. Our perspective is stuck in the past. On the other hand, if we are more focused on future, then we tend to live in anxiety of the things did not happen, but we expect them to happen any time. We hear some news about an earthquake and possible earthquakes in our region, and we start worrying about losing our home in an earthquake, or we are not sick, but we can be in a state expecting to become ill. In short, we can live all related concerns and anxiety about things that have not happened, as though they already happened. If there is no imminent and actual threat to me, yet if I still feel threatened, then it means that I am not in the moment. I mean, we need to know if this is a valid threat or not, if such conditions exist within that moment or not. I see some comments coming from our dear friends, summarily say that, I didn't want to be born to this world, I didn't choose this barren time comprehension. Well, I think I repeated that simile of seeing the landscape from the top floor of a skyscraper a few times in our previous videos. Let me briefly use this simile again. The level of our being's comprehension is wider, and this is the level of comprehension a life plan is made at for the next body our being needs to build in this world. And this is like seeing the landscape from the top floor of a skyscraper. The destination is clearly seen at the distance, but small details of the path that leads to that target are not distinct. When our being builds a body that will have the necessary experiences and lessons in order to reach that destination, we, as the vehicle of our being in the hydrogen cosmos, are like the traveler that hit the first floor button on the elevator of that skyscraper, and when we take the first step on the path leading to our destination, all those previously undetected details of the path become apparent. We can use the same simile to understand the different perceptions of time at the level of our being and at the level of our bodily existence. That wider perception may contain past, present, and future. Yet at our narrower level of perception, we can only perceive and exist by the simple time comprehension. Last week we had discussed dreams and astral projections, that last only a few seconds but felt like hours. I mean, when we have experiences when we are in elevated states of consciousness, then our perception of time becomes wider. Imagine much higher levels of existence, semi-subtle and subtle realms where the beings can exist without five senses, without current limits of the physical body, then perception becomes freer. And please don't think that the world time is not valuable. Yes, it is simple, but just perfect for the experiences and impressions we humans need to gradually live through for the further development of our beings.
Do you remember Jodie Foster's movie, The Contact? It is a 1997 movie, and if some of our dear friends didn't watch this movie, sorry, but this will be a spoiler for them. Years ago, I watched this movie, but back then, I watched it as a movie about extraterrestrial life. Last week, I was zapping TV channels and voila! It was on in one of movie channels. Just another synchronicity. And because my focus was time as I study for this series in the past few weeks, this time I watched it from a different perception. A scientist that has a dream of making contact with extraterrestrials, and when a signal arrives from a planet, I think, in the Vega star system, detailing how to build a machine, her dream comes true. The machine is made up of 3 circles turning in different directions within each other and a spherical cabin over these circles. And she enters the cabin, these 3 circles begin to rotate around each other, and for the other scientists observing the alien machine from outside, cabin does not launch but only falls down for a second or two. However, the scientist in the cabin experiences a totally different time period. She goes to another realm, visits galaxies etc., and meets her late father and have a dialogue with him. Then, suddenly she is back and understands that she never left the Earth. Others tell her that you just fall down a few seconds, that's all. Okay, I will stop now, otherwise this will be a total spoiler. In the sense the passages we read and we will read, I can say that, while others outside the machine are in the superficial time comprehension, the scientist in the machine had widened her perceptual time. Yes, dear friends, I suggest you to watch this movie. It is a good example for understanding differences between time comprehensions explained in the divine order and the universe.
Such states of consciousness are transpersonal states. Sometimes they are called elevated, heightened, modulated states of consciousness. Regardless of the names we give such experiences, these are so rare, unique, unexpected and impressive that no matter how hard we try to repeat the same experience, we cannot repeat these. So, dear friends, please do not ask or look for evidence, for tangible proof of such experiences. Just like the interrogation scenes in that movie you mentioned, such experiences are true for the persons that live those experiences. The scientist Jodie Foster played in that movie couldn't repeat the experience she had in that machine in the front of the panel of other scientists. Shamans name the realm of such experiences as the upper world, and the world we live in as the lower world. When we have all those extraordinary experiences in the upper world, and are back to our regular world, we may waver due to the scope of that sudden widening of comprehension and the following sudden narrowing. Yes, our mind wants to repeat such experiences, to label them, to categorize or classify these, in order to give some credibility to those experiences in the eyes of ours and others, yet such transpersonal states occur once and in an instant. Let's continue reading. This needs to be explained more objectively. For some problems to be well understood, it is necessary to intuit the time reality as powerfully as possible. To make it easier, we will explain the topic of time with diagrams and graphics. We call simple time, which is subject to the understanding of 3 dimensions, superficial time. For the flow of this time, as shown in Figure 2, advances in one direction like a spiral's circles drawn upon a surface. Let us point out that this diagram is simply a graphic drawn to explain the concept of time, and to ensure the objective comprehension of simple time. As seen in the diagram, superficial time does not advance in a straight line. Around a point of a long line, upon a surface that is vertical to that line, it revolves spirally by cycles. In this diagram, there is a surface, OPSR, where a straight line ZZ1 pierces it vertically at a point A. This surface is exactly vertical to the line ZZ1, and upon this surface, there is a spiral drawn starting from the point A. As this spiral is drawn because it advances vertically to the line ZZ1, no matter how long this spiral is, it does not travel any distance on the line ZZ1, but merely draws cycles around the point A. So, this is the progress of the superficial time comprehension, and the line ZZ1 is the original time which encompasses universe. And let us point that this original time is not the spherical time particular to the higher cosmos which we will mention later. This is the manifestation of the super-universe time principle in universe, which encompasses all realities of time and traverses throughout our universe. We do not talk about it for now. Upon the progress of this spiral, let us define point A as the moment a man is born and point F as the moment he dies. Let us take one of his states which continues its development from his birth to his death. Let's say a capability of him. As seen in the diagram, as this capability goes from point A to point F, it has passed through each of the spiral circles that came along from points B, C, D, E, F. As seen clearly in the diagram, each of these points constitutes a period on the flow of the spiral. For example, a circle is completed between A and B. However, following it once, there is a second and wider circle BC and a third circle CD follows it. In this way, circles run after each other, getting wider until the final circle EF. And each of these constitutes a period that is, cycles a piece throughout the lifetime. And these periods come after another by following an order. Here, the concept of past period, present period, and future period exist as fundamental, and this is an imperative of the superficial time comprehension. In life, some capabilities have continued to develop as this line AF, however, all capabilities do not. For example, as seen in the diagram, the development of capability AJ has continued for 4 periods of life and stopped there. Likewise, development of the capability AM has been shorter and continued only for 3 periods. There are shorter developments of capabilities as well, for example only for 1 period. Therefore, in the life of a man, all of his capabilities do not develop to the same degree.
Now, let's look at this figure 2 closely, dear friends. Just remember that this figure is given to us as a metaphor so we may comprehend the explanations given in this passage better and easier. Let's imagine the OPRS plane as this white paper and it contains a lifetime. When we imagine this OPS plane vertically and as containing a spiral on it, then this spiral shows the cycles we go through in that lifetime. The point A in the middle of the figure expresses the moment of a person's birth, and the point F is the moment of death. We assume a lifetime as linear, progressing horizontally, starting from a certain point at past and progress towards future. However, as we have seen in the figure A, from the perspective of the Z1 line, which is the original time that a human being's lifetime is just a point, the point A, we progress on a spiral as we live a lifetime. Yes, we are born at the point A, and following the spiral, we die at the point F. The straight line, Z1, pierces the point A vertically, because the surface or plane is vertical to the line expressing the original time. And as you see, no matter how long the spiral of a lifetime is, it just draws cycles around the point A. And this situation is valid for all lifetimes of a being. Yes, this figure clearly shows us that, the moment of our birth, that is, point A is in contact with the original time, and we live the rest of a lifetime within various cycles, within various chain of events. One cycle brings us to a certain point, we move on or get stuck at such points, etc. Then events bring us to a point of breakthrough, then our lifetime moves up to another cycle in the spiral. All of these happen within the plane of the spiral, and as we progress from point A to point B, this makes up a circle. Then another circle follows another circle as we move from one cycle to another throughout a lifetime, until we reach the point F. Now, please look at these other points, sometimes at 3 cycles and sometimes at 4 cycles on the spiral. Of course, as we live a lifetime by cycles around a spiral, we also try to actualize the life plan outlined for that lifetime. In the life plan of that lifetime, the being aims to actualize and materialize some certain talents that will get us developed. For example, we plan to widen our talent for patience, so we will make various applications of becoming patient at various points at each cycle. As you can see at the figure, this talent, let's say, gets developed for 3 cycles, at points K, L, M. However, another talent, for example selflessness, that we plan to widen or strengthen in that lifetime gets developed at 4 cycles, at points G, H, I, J. So, even though our life plan consists the developmental needs of let's say 4 talents, we can get developed a little at one talent but much more at another talent. So, through a life, between the points of A and F, we progress on the spiral, but some talents get developed more and some talents may get developed less in relation to the needs outlined the life plan of that lifetime. Later, we will read how all those 500 to 700 similar cross-sections of lifetimes make up a structure of developmental progress. I will not go there, for now. After the completion of a lifetime at the point F, the talents a being could get developed during that lifetime becomes processed in the spatium period to be added to the essence knowledge of the being. And if there are needs that could not be met or insufficiently met, then the being makes a new life plan to build a new body for the experiences needed for fulfilling these lacking points. And another lifetime begins at the point A, and continues on a spiral until the point F of a new cross-section. And this system provides us with the richness of experiences and possibilities in this way, and the divine order and the universe schematically expresses this encompassing system in simple terms in this passage.
One of our dear friends asks, why the square? Shouldn't it be a circle? Well, soon we will read and discuss the spherical time comprehension, and then you will have answers to such questions. For now, I'd like to ask you to focus on the spiral. This is not a downward spiral but upward. The spiral of a lifetime, with each turn, widens and expands a little bit more. Yes, life expands with the expansion of our realities. Each turn contains the previous circle, hence the older realities. Yet, this does not mean that we develop all talents and abilities we need to develop during that life as outlined in the life plan. Let's say, a person gets a good education and becomes a medical doctor or an engineer, yet if that person couldn't develop his or her capacity of compassion or selflessness, then that person can display or manifest the developed abilities in a selfish and harmful manner. You may remember from our previous videos or from the previous passages of the book that the entire lifetime of a human being and entire lifetime of humankind progress in a similar way. And also, that we can think of 500 to 700 lifetimes of a human being as a single lifetime. At this straight line presenting the original time, all those cross-sections of those 500 to 700 lifetimes of a human being become converged at a single point at the uppermost perceptual point of the being. And some of these lifetimes can be only a few months in the womb, a few years or over 100 years. Duration of a lifetime is never fixed. It all depends on the being's developmental needs. Also, please do not think that the number of X expressing the abilities that need to get developed during a lifetime. No, this is not fixed neither. It may be different for each human being. Yes? Let's continue reading. Now, we will explain sublime time comprehension. Although we will talk about it on the diagram as well, in order to intuit as much as possible such a comprehension, which does not exist in the world. Intuitions should be forced while studying the diagram. Here, imagination should be used, and the concepts intended to be explained should be tried to intuit by visualization, and if contemplated with patience, very precious intuitions will be gained. We call the sublime time comprehension, spherical time comprehension, or perceptual time. Sublime time comprehension is not a simple system, unlike the previous one, which revolves upon a surface as spirals in one direction. This is a time complex, which advances by flowing in all directions within the whole of a sphere. Here, the concept of time flow in question has infinite directions advancing from the source of the sphere towards each of the infinite points of the circle and infinite scope, which is in accordance with these directions. Figure 3 is the cross-section of a sphere. That is, it is like a cut half seen after a solid sphere. For example, a ball is cut in 2 equal halves with a knife cutting through its center, and as seen in the diagram, this is only a surface consisting a circle. The line OA is the radius of this circle. Now, upon this surface, it is possible and natural that a superficial time flow comprehension exists as spirals revolving around the former O center. Therefore, on one cross-section of this ball there is a superficial time comprehension. This is a value sufficient to contain all realities of a man's life in the world. However, this cross-section should be imagined not on the ball or on paper, but in the imagination. Without changing its position, other cross-sections can be made from other parts of the ball, providing it always crosses from the center. And in this way, infinite imaginary cross-sections can be obtained. We can divide this ball in 2 halves from separate directions as much as we can, depending on how sharp our knife is, how perfect our technique is, and how wide our imagination is. In the meantime, because the position of the ball will stay fixed, directions of spirals displaying the simple time upon these infinite surfaces do not fit each other, and superficial time spirals in infinite directions occur. So, within a sphere, there are, we could say in almost infinite numbers, distinct possibilities of superficial time. And the moment we join all these distinct time comprehensions, and imagine connecting them into a single occurrence, we may then visualize spherical time comprehension. We also call it perceptual time for short. If a man who lives in the world can use his comprehension at a moment in time's progress upon only one surface, a being that lives in a superworld plan can use its comprehension, which is almost the infinite multitude of this comprehension, at the same moment in perceptual time. This situation, naturally, can only be intuited in the world by visualization. This knowledge teaches that perceptual time has a richer scope which cannot be compared with superficial time. According to this, with superficial time comprehension, a man can only move in one direction at a given moment, for he has to follow a single sequence within the concepts of past, present, and future, as obeying the imperatives of superficial time with all of his comprehension, acts, and behaviors. And he will certainly participate in the sequenced periods of a spiral. For, his material state is not suitable for his getting out of it. However, a being obeying perceptual time has the possibility of living the concepts of past, present, and future in infinite directions at the same moment, by joining them into a single occurrence. For the subtle matter milieu which it exists, and permits it to live upon all surfaces of a sphere at the same moment.
Yes, another comprehensive passage that requires to put our power of imagination into hard work. Maybe we can start with this short video from Media for Math website.
Cross-sections of a sphere. A plane that slices through a sphere can create circular cross-sections. In the illustration shown, a vertical plane slices through a sphere. In the process, it creates a circular cross-section. There are an infinite number of cross-sections possible with a plane intersecting a sphere. In this 3D animation, you can see a cross-section of a sphere.
Imagine a sphere. We cut this sphere into thin cross-sections and imagine that each cross-section is a superficial time, and each superficial time contains spirals. And please don't think those cross-sections only in one direction. As in this figure, different cross-sections at different planes or angles can be cut off from a sphere. Now imagine that there are innumerable cross-sections of superficial time containing spirals at innumerable different angles of that sphere. All those spirals make up an immense web of spirals. The web of causes and effects chains that make up this web can only be comprehended by the being, because it is in a much subtler field. Our being can appreciate and understand that kind of complexity. It is called by different names, but expresses the same comprehension of time: sublime time comprehension, spherical time comprehension, perceptual time comprehension. As we human beings try to do our best for understanding the events in our life, making efforts to understand the effects of our past deeds and actions on our present and future states, working to understand the cause and effect chains of the past events so our future can change for better, we make another turn on the spiral of our lifetime. We live in the superficial time at a cross-section of the spherical time. That arm of our spiral meets or intersects other arms of the spirals of other human beings' lifetimes. Now, let's try to imagine such an intricate, complex, and elaborate structure, and if we can, let's try to imagine the capacity and comprehension of a being that can perceive, understand, and observe such a system. Yes, in this passage, the divine order and the universe gives us another time comprehension, a higher and more encompassing one than the superficial time comprehension.
Of course, we must always remember that, as the book repeatedly reminds us, even though examples like cross-sections, spirals, spheres, etc. are used, actually the real system is not that simple. And the spherical time comprehension we read in this passage is nicely expressed in that movie you mentioned, The Contact. That alien machine consists of circles within each other, and when they start to rotate, they create, let's say, a time field for the scientist in the cabin to experience a wider time comprehension than the superficial time of the world. That moment the cabin touches the time field, this is like a cross-section, a lifetime spiral. And our being, at that spherical and perceptual field, sends out influences in a multi-directional manner. A major part of the energy and concentration of our being, when directed to build a body in the crude matter of the hydrogen cosmos, what happens? Let's take this piece of paper again. We may imagine the fabric of space-time as a plane, and when that concentrated influence of the being arrives at here, a complex system of motions begins, and a body gets formed, its organs get shaped, etc. Remember, nothing enters to or exits from that body. The being is in contact with the body only by induction, only by the influences it sends. And when our being withdraws its concentrated energy and influence from the body, death occurs. Yes, we talk about these processes in simple terms, but we all know this is not so simple. After all, we talk about a flux of influences that brings out a minuscule universe in a body that works perfectly. Of course, again, such expressions as birth, death, etc. are still used for our convenience, to bring out some understanding in our minds. All those geometric shapes, terms, and examples are just to activate our imagination, so we can gain some intuitions about this knowledge about spherical or perceptual time. Considering the esoteric schools of the ancient times, where people had to be initiated after going through many rituals and trials, to even talk about the spiral as a symbol of life. Now we talk about it openly, and we try to intuit a model of a time comprehension that embraces the whole universe. As we read in this passage, a being obeying perceptual time has the possibility of living the concepts of past, present, and future in infinite directions at the same moment by joining them into a single occurrence. I'd like to ask a question to our dear friends. What are the beings that have a much wider spherical time comprehension and a much wider perspective but still closely connected to the world? Maybe next week we can read some answers from our friends.
Of course, we are trying to make a common language among us in this series. We, as commentators, talk about what those terms and concepts in the book mean or express to us as persons so we can make more sense to you as we read and comment on the passages we read together each week. Of course, a common language is not enough because we need to support our expressions and further thinking by imaginative work, meditations, and by reflecting on the explanations given in the book about the spherical time comprehension. Yes, the knowledge in this book is given as a gift to humankind, but how to utilize this knowledge in our life is up to our efforts and comprehension. And each week, we get together around the same aim. We talk about higher realities all of us need to live in and live by, such as love, conscience, compassion, beauty, duty, because the times we live in are full of the appearances of intense sensuality, intense earthly cravings. And in order to be able to say a few helping words or giving a helping hand to other fellow human beings that suffer due to the automatisms they need to go out but cannot, first we need to begin living out of our own automatisms. As the flight security talk goes, put on your oxygen mask first, then help your loved ones to out on their oxygen masks. Yes, together with you, dear friends, we try our best to develop our understanding, and as we continue do this, each of us can reach other fellow beings, not only with our words but with our applied knowledge, with our actions and deeds. Next week, we will be continuing this topic, so please watch this video a few times or read the related passages in your copy of the book, and use your power of imagination to gain more insights about the spherical time. By the way, are there any replies to your question, dear Tülin?
Yes, the first correct answer already came. The beings in duty. They utilize the spherical time comprehension to govern all systems in the whole universe. And the scope of the cause and effect chains they can observe and appreciate is of course much wider than ours. Yes, next week, I will be in the same time zone with you, dear sister. And, as you said, we will continue reading more passages about time. Hoping to see you all next week.
Good evening, everyone. See you next week.